interview with Walter S. Baker at the Schuyler Ridge home, Clifton Park, New York. It is January 30th, 2003, approximately 1:15 in the afternoon. The interviewers are Michael Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you tell me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Walter S. Baker, full name, date of birth, April 17th, 1916, and what was the other?
Where were you born, please?
In Somerset, New Jersey, actually, P-Pack, which was near Gladstone, New Jersey, Somerset County.
Okay. Before you entered military service, what was your educational background?
Well, mostly in the way of photography. I took courses under Jaegers and Lutens in photography, and of course, I had my high school education, and I took courses. This is before I entered the service, so I have to be a little careful of this. You know, most of it took place during the military services.
Okay. You were in the National Guard from 1936 to 1939. Why did you join the National Guard?
It so happened I was working in Wall Street, and I as a billing clerk and clerk typist, and a friend of mine came in, and a friend of my father's, and he talked to me one time and said, "Hey, you ought to join the 7th Regiment." Well, I didn't realize what I was getting into, so I said, "Well, it sounds fine, the National Guard. I'll join it." So I did. I joined the National Guard, and then I find out it was an elite regiment which looked for people who had money that I didn't have, and so I did join, however, and I managed. It cost me money each year, just a little bit over $100, I think it was, a year, just to stay in the thing. And I enjoyed it very much. I was in a machine gun company, Company M, and I became an artificer, which is between a private and a corporal, you might say. And I set up the machine gun ranges and so forth for the target practice. Now we had 22 machine guns, 22 caliber machine guns, but we used a light to show where the bullets were hitting. And of course, if you move the up and down and left and right mechanism, you would see where the bullets would hit. And it was, since I had more experience zeroing in the guns, why I got into the 360 club, which meant 360 hits out of 400, which was considered pretty good at that time. And let's see, I'll let you take it on from there.
Well, since the 7th Regiment was one of the most elite units in the state, how did you get along with the others in the unit?
Oh, wonderful. They were all great guys. It was, there wasn't any actual snobbery there in any way, in any form. They were just, well, what can we do to help you, and so forth. In fact, I bought my mess jacket. I believe I had a function. They had a special jacket you wore at mess, more or less, soup and fish from the military services. And I bought that second hand from one. let me have it for a reasonable, very reasonable price.
How did you attend a lot of their social functions too, or?
I attended a few of their social. Well, mostly, however, they held what was the name of the games there? The Melrose Games there. And the Melrose Games, where I was the photographer, was Speed Graphic at that time I was using. And we had Jess Owens and all the rest there. And it was very interesting. And I also, as a photographer, I would go out to Westbury and watch the play polo. The 7th had a very good polo team, so I didn't play polo, but I got to go to all the games, and I also got tickets to the opera, which I wasn't that enthusiastic about, but it was nice to say that somebody in the 7th had attended the opera.
How long were you in the New York Guard?
Just for 3 years. That was 1936, 1939, and I got out because we had a fellow from Lydgate come over from England, and he used to lecture us on the wars, past wars, and how they were fought, and what modern war would be like. And he was saying that we'd undoubtedly be drawn into the Second World War, and he was venturing how the war would be won. And although he didn't have the extremist view of the Germans, he did have a belief that they would be strong enough to overcome France. And when the war ended, we were told by the authorities in charge of the 7th Regiment that if we did get in the war, the 7th Regiment would be disbanded as such. 107th would no longer be the same 7th because they'd be taking in people from everywhere. And all those who were in the 7th Regiment were authorized or would be sent immediately to OCS and become officers. You couldn't very well have a regiment of officers. So that changed the complexion of the outfit. And I wanted to fly. And so I thought, well, maybe there's a better way. So I went up to, I decided I'd wanted to join the RAF. I just had very little flying experience. I didn't have enough money to take much in the way of lessons. I think about 2 or 3 lessons I had. But I thought I'd get trained in England or somewhere. But when I got that, a friend of my father's heard about me going into the RAF, and his name was Frank Doherty. He had been in the First World War, and during the First World War, he'd had I think about three kills himself, but then he was shot down himself, and he was quite a gentleman. I'm going into detail about him, but, well, all right. What had happened was he got shot, and how the bullet ever got, well, it went through his teeth here, took out the 2 front teeth, took off his nose, took off part of his nose, and came up. And I don't know how that ever happened, unless it was shrapnel, which possibly you could feel it did that. But the funny thing is that the Germans gave him teeth, made teeth for him, and they stitched up his nose, and he looked like the man of distinction from there on out. His nose was a large, very, very, very nose, but it took it off, and he was really nice looking. But he said, look, Walt, you don't want to go into the RAF. Join the Canadian Air Force. In the Canadian Air Force, you'll find they're much more like the Americans, and you'll get better pay. Well, that was all right for me. So in May of 1944,
41, I think you
44, May of 41, pardon me, yes, I'm
That's
thinking
okay.
about it when I changed
That's when
over.
you left, yeah.
Yeah, I went up and joined it at 1254 Bishop Street, I remember. And
In what city was that?
Montreal, Montreal.
Mhm.
And where do you want me to go from there?
Well, tell us about your time in the Canadian Air Force, your training and
Well,
so on.
it was just a wonderful thing all the way through. From there, we were sent out to get training in aerial combat, not combat, but in navigation and all the things that would be necessary for.
What kind of planes did you fly?
Well, at that time I wasn't flying yet, see.
Oh, okay.
So this one that we were sent to in Ottawa, not in Ottawa, hold it just a minute, I'll have to think of where that was. Toronto.
Uh-huh.
And Toronto, there was a fairgrounds there, and at the fairgrounds, they took over a part of the fairgrounds, and we had our training in there. And it was good training. My knowledge of military deportment and so forth held me in fairly good stead. And as I say, I enjoyed that. And I found out that one thing, although they were very fair there, and to everybody, it didn't pay to be too smart. One fellow I knew, Belanda was his name. He had graduated cum laude, would it be, from the big university there. What's the name of that again?
McGill?
Up in
In
Toronto?
Toronto?
Yeah.
McGill University.
McGill,
something, yeah.
yeah, he had been, yeah. And he had also played on the hockey team up there, I know. But when they found out he was so smart, they told him, sorry, we took the link trainer where you sat in it and you just watched the instruments, and if you couldn't follow the instruments and use just your own feeling, you'd be way off. Well, actually that was a farce, because Belanda was as sharp as anybody, but being so smart, he was made a navigator, because that's where they needed people with brains. Mm-hmm. Thank you for the McGill.
Now, did you fly the de Havilland Tiger Moth?
Yes. And in fact, that's what I flew mostly. After I graduated from these ground courses, I went out to, I'm going to go to Fingal first, which I didn't get to fly any planes at Fingal, but a friend of mine, Bill Ashworth, and I, friends I had up there, we were in what they call security guard training. Well, in security guard, you just ran around with a rifle, which was the kind that had the bolt stick into your arm here, and it was black and blue by the time you did all your freighting. You held it gun differently than in the American way. You held it straight up. There they held it black. And the Enfield rifle. anyway, we asked to get a chance to parachute out, and they refused us, saying, no, there's only one chance you should have. If you make it, you may as well do it when you have some use to it. And if you don't, there's nothing in it for us. So anyway, then after that, I was sent to Oshawa, Ontario. Oshawa, Ontario at that time was elementary flying, which was a flying school which was run by civilians under contract with the government. And the wife of the president of General Motors, I guess, there, was handling this school. And she, and her way, was to say to the civilian people, give these boys anything they want. Anything they want, just let them have, and we'll see that they enjoy everything that's done here. So sure enough, when we went in first and we started flying, it was fun flying the Tiger Moth. I wasn't particularly good on my first few landings because I had a way of you're supposed to land a plane directly into wind. But I figured out, well, I couldn't get the plane to bank enough so you slipped into wind enough. So I would come in and just as before I hit the ground at an angle, I'd twist my rudder and I would put it on the ground, and so he allowed me to fly. I think I was 6.5 hours at that time. I'm not sure of that. And it was a scary thing for them because I'd been coming in the wrong way, for a while. So anyway, but I enjoyed flying there at Oshawa and the wonderful way we were treated. We had a man who was a Batman for us, who would clean all our clothing, polish our buttons, and shine our boots and everything else. But of course, that was because the wife of the president was there.
How were you accepted as an American? Were there any other Americans there?
The Americans and Canadians got along very well.
Were there other Americans with you?
Oh, yes. There were 35,000 joined the Canadian Air Force. And I think it eventually got up to 70,000. I'm not positive of that figure. But anyway, it was a joy flying with them, and I like that.
What types of planes did you train on?
I trained on, well, after I had, I'll keep things in a little better order for you. I first went out to Fort William in the Tiger Moth, and after that I was sent to, wait a minute, be careful, I'm getting a mistake in here. There's a mistake in this. After I graduated from Dunville, no, I've got to go back the other way. Yeah, I'm back out.
That's okay.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
That's fine.
But anyway, the Tiger Moth flying was fun, and the instructors were, all of them that I knew there were good at flying. Some of them weren't as experienced as others, and hadn't flown much at the time they came there. But we found that, for instance, one case is landing on skis. Now, landing on skis is a very difficult thing to do. You know how they talk about landing on glassy water is very difficult? Landing on skis can be much, much harder, particularly on a dull day with an overcast where you have no shadows. And you can't tell how far down that snow is. And so you can land way up in the air and so forth. And also, when you landed on skis, your skis sometimes would plow in under the soft snow, and you'd stop rather suddenly. And then you try to back by pushing and pulling and pull by hand, pulling the ship back and forth. You finally make it back so you could get off again. That happened at a little field where the instructors particularly would go to have a little relaxation on their days, the weekends when they didn't have to fly. They went out they loved to fly, so they'd go out to Bishop Field and do things like that. And so anyway, that was nice out there at Fort William. And also the fact that there was one place that I was not the one that first found it, but another fellow had found it. When you came in to go into at this field, you went down and you could get under the limbs of the trees, and then suddenly almost you pull up and you come out as if you were coming right out of the forest. Well, I made a bad mistake. The wind was flowing from the back of me instead of with me, and the speed of the aircraft is the speed of the aircraft minus or plus the speed of the wind behind or in front of you. So I judged it wrong, and I came back, and the whole bottom of the wings were torn down all the way across. When I came into land at the airport, everybody looked at me. This plane with all its wings had fabric hanging down. They were fabric planes, of course, and they were pretty nice about it. They said, well, anybody can make a mistake. I don't think that was reported to any Air Force authority. As I say, Fort William was also a civilian-run place. So, but they McDougal run it. I don't think they reported that to McDougal. And another thing is, one time then, where they turned over and made us all civilian. They decided they were going to take all these civilian-run companies, training stations, and turn them into regular Air Force. So when they did that, they sent in senior officers who were very, very critical of the way the civilians have been running things. So one day, the lieutenant, there was a call came in, and somebody on the phone said, there's a plane running on the road, right down the road, on its wheels. And are they supposed to do that? well, of course, the administrator hearing that, he says, what, did you get the number of the plane? Yes, 4078. Well, it could have been a little different number, but it was in that near area. And 4078. Now, who's got 4078? We don't know. It's Doyle's plane. Oh, Doyle. Has he landed yet? No. It's Doyle. Is Doyle around there? No. Oh, that was it. And so finally, after everybody's held, nobody else can take off until Doyle's back in. They're not going to have any flying, anything else. He's going to put this fellow in jail as far as he could. And then somebody from the hangar says, "But sir, 4078 is being told to Winnipeg for repairs." So you can see the life was fine at those places. Anything else?
While you were in the Canadian Air Force, where were you on December 7th and how in 41, and what was your reaction to the events that happened at Pearl Harbor?
Well, I shouldn't really tell that story today. So there were 4 Americans, and I went to Trenton Flying School, and at Trenton, I flew many different kinds of aircraft, by the way. All that were in the training command. I flew Avro Ansons and other things, and before that I flew at Hagersville. Maybe I better go back to there if you don't mind skipping around. Well, I went to on December 7th, 19, what? I've got to be careful on this one. December 7th and 41. I definitely was in Dunnville, and we had a fight between the four Americans and 2 Canadians got together, and the New Zealanders who were training there with us. We happened to be primarily New Zealanders in that. Well, this, I don't know, it's nice to put it in print. They were always very envious of the Americans, who were always claiming our planes were the fastest in the world, that our B-17s were 300-mile-an-hour bombers, and that our fighters were the best, this, that, and the other thing, and they called it Yankee BS. And in a way, we were ourselves embarrassed about what was claimed. And so this time, on December 7th, they began to hold what they called a haga in New Zealand. It's a dance where they dance around, say this, that, and we'll show that's what the Yankees deserve. The VS all the time. And Lewis, fellow, his first name I've forgotten at the moment, but anyway, he says, "Fellows," he said, "you don't really mean that, though. We all have to get together on that." And they said, like hell we do. And we had a fight. And I can remember I got hit, and I had these teeth broken a bit, and I also had a big whopper of bruise on the top of my head. but I can remember having a day a table leg and trying to beat him. So that isn't very good to put in there, but it's a story that maybe you better leave that one out. It doesn't create a nice impression.
We get similar stories.
Yes.
All right, let's see, where were we going now?
Well, so you didn't have any combat duty with the Canadian Air Force? You were a flight
No.
instructor?
A
And,
flight instructor only, and I put over 2,000 hours in up there, but that included in all these different type aircraft I was telling you
did
about.
you ever fly in Hurricanes or Spitfires? Or,
That's another story. Yes, a fellow who was the Canadian Car and Foundry assembled Hurricanes at where I was then. Let's see. I'd Fort William. I took the fellows out one time and on a weekend flying and let him fly. One of the mechanics there, I think he may have been a pilot, but I think he was a chief mechanic, but he was the only one who was in at the station at the time, and so I took him up and I taught him to fly the Tiger Moth. Well, he said, I'm the only one there. You want to try and fly the Hurricane? I said, yes. So I did, and I just went up and went around, came in and landed, and that was my only the only time I ever flew a Hurricane. Wasn't much to it. It wasn't particularly a performance plane, but it was performance to me because at that time I hadn't flown anything that as fast as that.
So you decided in 1944 to join, after you left the Canadian Air Force, to join the American Air Corps?
Yeah. And when I was given a chance also in 1941 when I was at Fort William. We went out to Manitoba, and I went. They said they'd transfer us. And there were a great many of us offered the chance to transfer us to the American Air Force. Well, Jack Kelly and I and a fellow by the name Schroeder, I think, was with us then, but I'm not positive, maybe not. But anyway, Jack Kelly was with me, and we were offered a chance to go down to Randolph Field to instruct pilots at Randolph Field, and so that didn't sound too good to us. We felt that we wanted to get into combat by then, and so Jack and I, after they offered us this chance to transfer, and I guess everybody there thought we would do it, why, we both said no. We said we'll just continue on in the Canadian Air Force. We'll have a better chance here. Well, that was very interesting because as soon as we had done that, had gone through and said that were acceptable, people came to us and said, look, we'll give you $1,000 to transfer to fly Lockheed's across the ocean. Now this by way of Greenland, I suppose, and it was a ferry aircraft across the ocean. That was it. Maybe it was PBMs, but PBYs, and $1,000 if you'll do it. Well, we turned that down too, but it would have been interesting to do.
When you went into the United States Army Air Corps, could you compare the training and the discipline between that and the Canadian Air Corps?
The American Air Force was much stiffer, I think, in the training. Now, once you became pilots, it became a much more reasonable Air Force. But we had none of that treatment that they had of having to stand at attention if you were a senior, a junior, and a senior person came in and so forth. The discipline was completely different in that way. The Canadian Air Force was very, very, very good. In fact, we had an instructor, a sergeant pilot at not Fort William, at at Dunville. We had a sergeant pilot at Dunville, a very good pilot, who went to a nightclub in Ottawa with his wife. And he's with his wife, and this sergeant pilot sees the fellow that he had as a student. He says, "Hello, Bill, how are you?" He says, when you address me, you will say, "Sir," and stand at attention. Well, the sergeant was very peeved. He got back and he offered his resignation, saying he just didn't feel that he had to do that, take that. Well, to make a long story short, they called the officer up who'd been stationed way out in Winnipeg, no, further out west, out in Vancouver, that he was to come back at his own expense, and he was to appear for proceedings. Well, he appeared for proceedings, and they had him come in, and he had to go, and they had a case where they went and got him to apologize over the loudspeakers to the sergeant pilot for the way he had behaved, and he had to have everything was at his own expense, and that he would never do that again. We had another one where they drummed out a enlisted man that was caught stealing, and they just drummed him out and ripped off his things.
Now, when you went into the United States Air Force, did you have to do any other training, or Did they accept your background from the Canadian Air Force?
They accepted my background. But in fact, funny thing is the first time I landed, why, I came in and it's the first now a fighter plane, there's no two seats in it, wasn't at that time. And it was on the old type C. And when I got in the P-51, I felt at home as if everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. The trim was right here, forward or back. Trim is the way you make a plane go up and down by, you familiar with these terms?
Somewhat, yes.
Yeah, all right. The trim was right here for nose up or down. There's rudder trim this way right there. Landing gear was right here where you could put it up. Throttle, of course, was right where you could easily handle it with one hand. A very nice position. All the instruments were exactly where you felt they should be. The engine controls were minor controls to the attitude controls and speed and altitude and so forth. So my first landing on the P-51, I greased it in as if I was just, it's just absolutely perfect. It just touched the wheels down, and so I came in. One of the instructors said, Baker, you'll have to do better landings. You better look into that. Well, I thought, well, if he thought that he's got me mixed up with someone else, I'm sure that was right. So I didn't do anything about it. But then the next time, we were taking up practicing the instrument flying in T-6s. They've had T-6s also on the base at Pinellas Air Force, where I was stationed first. And so when we're going along, why I thought it was boring as can be. Here I'm looking out. There's two people, the instructor and the student, just watching their instruments. The instructor, of course, looked around a bit, but he couldn't be looking for other planes and so forth as much as the student could. So I got tired. I was flying in formation with him. Let's say I was probably flying like this in formation with him. So I decided I would enjoy myself. So I backed over there like this, and then skidding very greatly, I dropped into where I belonged over on this side, and he came down. After I came down, up on the board was my name and 5 stars. I said, gee, what's that? Somebody put stars on there for me, and I went up and I erased them. And nobody said anything. And I thought nothing of it. But then the students, my other students, Bengtson, Tupacek, came to me and said, geez, you erased those stars. You're supposed to be out with full pack going around the runway 5 times around the runway. Well, it so happened that David C. Jones, with the captain, the operations officer at the base. In other words, he was in charge of all training. I I think he got an idea that I was a good pilot, probably from the first thing that I'd landed nicely. And second, that the thing that I done a good job as far as he was concerned. And maybe he said, forget it. He that later became the chief of staff of the United States Air Force later on, which was the highest rank you could hold. He was a great fellow. He took lots of chances himself. I had always thought he'd get somewhere. We were flying one day there at Pinellas, and we went through, we're going through real low flying, and a bunch of birds came up just as we're going through. They hit my wing so hard that it dented the whole front part of the plane. But I guess he blamed that on himself because I didn't get any admonition for that. Yeah.
How did you like the way the P-51 handled?
Oh, wonderful. As I said, everything was, you felt as if you'd been in it all your life.
Okay, when were you sent, you were sent out to the Pacific Theater? When were you sent out to the Pacific?
Let's see, May 1944.
Were you sent out with a squadron or a unit or?
Yes, although it was not all the same units. I was sent with Major Bray, and he was a good friend of mine when we got to New Guinea. So up to that time, we had been more or less of a one unit group. But when we got to New Guinea, we were then reassigned to other units.
Now, when you went to the Pacific, did you fly out or did you go by?
I flew.
You flew out, okay.
Yeah, an LB-40. That was a B-24 with a big, tall tail on it. Instead of B-24s had two fins on them. But the LB-40s, they're going like this all the time in the air, you know. So I flew over there, and every time we passed the equator, why, we've changed from one time to another time, and so we were quite something. Let's see, what more you want to know? Oh.
I'm just not sure on the date because he said he went on May of 44. I was born in November of 44, and he took a flight up from Florida by airplane to visit Mom, didn't he?
Yeah, let's not get that in either, Martha. I don't think we want to get that in.
Yeah, but I think
I was loaned up.
Okay, when were you first in combat? Looks like 45.
And when I got to New Guinea, which was in May 44.
What kind of combat missions did you fly?
Well, we flew missions against Wewak and Wadki and Rabaul.
Were you escorting bombers?
Yes, and when you're escorting bombers, it isn't like you see in most movies. You go around and you fight the fighter and knock out the fighter. No, you don't do that, because that leaves the rest of the bomb group unprotected. Because just you making one 360-degree turn in a case like that puts you so far back you won't catch up to the bombers. So all these pictures they show of all this combat and flying is really off the beam.
Well, describe how you would cover the bombers then. How did they actually cover the bombers?
Well, if they came in and made a pass toward the bombers, they're more interested in the bombers than the fighters. Why, we'd cover it by diving at them and making one pass, period. That's it. You make a pass and then swim back into formation. Yeah, now I'll tell you a case that happened in the Pacific over there. We were stationed at Nagab, and let me see if I can get this. We were stationed at Nagab, and we would take off first and cover the other planes that were escorting the bombers, such as the P-47, and we would land last because our fuel was so good and our speed was so good that we could take off first and land last. And it was that good, so that was pretty nice on the P-51. Yeah, and one thing we were doing when we hit well, that's another story. I'll tell you a mission that we took off from Shooting-Down. We had gone to Biak, or Shooting-Down is the name of it in the Netherlands name for it. Biak is another one. We had taken a transport plane to bring us down to there to bring back some new P-51s to Najab. And it's so hot there. It's at noon. It's like the natives even sit down usually and don't do anything at noontime. But anyway, it's so hot that your coolant on the P-51, if you have to wait long to take off, your coolant would pop and you'd have to come in and get more coolant put in. And this day-wise, there were other planes taken off, and we suffered from it. So when we took off, finally, all of our planes were hot. And we took off and climbed up, and I got out about, maybe an hour out, something like that, less than that maybe. And my coolant temperature went way up to the top. And I called the other leader on the flight, and I said, I've got to land. I said, my coolant is over the top. And they said, well, yeah, there's a field underneath us. I don't see any action. Don't know what it is. And then I saw this little island off the coast, which is named Wadkey. Now, Wadkey was an island that was a travelogue island. You saw these beautiful palm trees and everything like that. It was absolutely, and it's on a coral shelf, and it's bright, brilliant water there and everything else. So I saw that, and I saw what looked like a jeep, which probably was the U.S. So I went in and I landed there, and when after landing, it turned out my plane was okay. It was just an instrument problem, loose wire, and fixed pretty easily. But Pekorsky's plane had actually blown its coolant, so he had to land, and we didn't have any more coolant over there for them to use. So they telephoned or radioed PIAC to send out some coolant. In the meantime, while we went swimming in the coral reef there, oh, it was beautiful. You can't imagine how clear it was under that water. You saw tropical fish just like these, and you could see them all over. And but the big trouble is, as you climbed out, you cut your hands on the coral, and that gave you what they call the New Guinea crud. Every year you all the skin peels off your fingers. But anyway, it was the most beautiful place, and we found out that the airport we had headed, we're going to land on, was the Japanese one, and it would have been a mistake to land there. Yeah.
Did you fly the same plane all the time?
Not all the time, because no plane is 100%. If a plane is damaged or anything, or if it's had engine trouble, you couldn't keep the same plane. Now, we didn't put their names on our planes.
I was just gonna ask you that.
We didn't do that till after the war,
Uh-huh.
because the fighter planes, they didn't have the maintenance personnel available to keep them, ready them that fast, and the bomber planes generally they were available more often, or else they could afford to. If the bomber was tied up because of engine overhaul, they could afford to let people go, have off until the bomber was ready.
Now I notice here it says that you thought tropical storms were a problem. How did they create a problem for you?
Oh, well, on Okinawa a couple of times, the typhoons, it's same as hurricane here.
How did you get to Okinawa? Did you fly across?
Yes, I went first from Johnson Island. I landed, went down there, but that was only a short stop on the way to the Philippines. And so I went from the Johnson Island to the Philippines, at Clarkfield, and then from Philippines I went to Okinawa, and from Okinawa I went up to Japan, but
What kind of missions did you fly while you were in Okinawa?
Let me stop right here, we gotta change.
Okay. While you were in Okinawa.
yeah. Well, as I say, they were all the bomber escort. Yeah,
So you arrived there after the battles and you flew bomber escorts to Japan? Is that what you're...
yeah,
Okay.
650 miles up, and about it's the same back. You can come back two ways. Are you familiar with the shape of Japan?
Yes.
All right, then you know that the Kyushu on the bottom island, you could go out through the gate there and go down the west east side, or you could go up and come in on the west side. You're familiar with the way that it's arranged there?
Yes, somewhat.
All right. Well, I'll skip around now then and go into one of these missions. We flew up and from Okinawa, Najab, which is down on the southwestern tip of the island, and we flew up about an hour out. We'd had our briefing the night before, and we had arranged for somebody to wake us up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go out for the final briefing and weather and so forth. We knew who was on the trip, and when we took off very early in the morning, and well before sunup. In fact, it was, I guess, 5 o'clock or something like that. And we flew for an hour, and one of the fellows had problems with his engine. And the engine, that was probably Captain Waniger. When his engine quit, now, it was Lieutenant Waniger at that time. He was the flight leader, and he tried to get. Oh, all right, no. The flight, it was his wingman had an engine trouble. Captain Waniger's wingman had an engine trouble. So we used different measures like leaning it out and using high manifold pressure, cleans the lead off the plugs, and you can sometimes clear it up. But after we milled around for 20 minutes trying to get him there, because we felt we had to have 4 on the mission, he said, Lieutenant Waniger called me and said, I was tailing Charlie, so it's, you know the flight of 4, how they are. He says, well, can you take the flight up? He says, I'm going to go back with Lieutenant Waniger. Yeah. The flight leader, I'm not sure which one it was now. But anyway, can you take it on to and get up there in time to meet the Catalina, which was going to be flying at about 1,000 feet high over the inland sea there, looking for downed airmen. You know, that's the worst job in the world, but they fly out and patrol the inland sea in Japan and they rely on somebody coming to cover them. And it's a Navy plane, but the Air Force or Air Corps at that time was supposed to cover them. And we flew the 650 miles up there, but when I got up near Nagasaki, and figuring I would take a shortcut from Nagasaki into the inland sea, cutting across the top of Kyushu, which is a dangerous way to go because the more raw new mountains there had peaks that went up, and actually there's new mountains. You can have a peak right between your plane and another plane. Well, anyway, there's only the two of us now. The other fellow was Alan Linden. And I said, at Nagasaki, the sun turned a purple, a deep purple, and so I got called out, Alan Linden, to come in tight. I said, put on your wing lights, put on your wing lights and your cabin lights, and we'll watch. Now the cabin lights were mostly so I wouldn't have to use voice, but there wasn't much chance of anything happening anyway. But you could signal to go into trail if you wanted to make a turn or something. But in this case, we were all had our wing lights, and he came into a distance of maybe 500 feet maybe. Normally I'd be out about 1,500 in that plane. Anyway, I was worried about hitting these peaks. Anyway, he put on his wing lights and cabin lights, and the sun turned purple. Sun absolutely purple, and then it disappeared entirely. It was as black as the deepest night you could imagine, and we were letting down at an airspeed probably around 260 miles an hour, something like that. We still had our tip tanks on, and I was lucky when I got out to the bottom. The sunlight came through the channel from the west, came in and hit the water in such a way that there was a little gleam on the water from the sunlight coming in that channel, bouncing off the water, but it was still pitch black. But that came in, and then there was one little lamp light, and that hasn't been answered today. What that lamp was out there? One lamp at the mouth of the Hiroshima harbor at Curry, which was lit, and I turned in toward Hiroshima Harbor, calling the Catalina all the time. Alan also called in case his radio was better than mine. We couldn't locate the cat. But in any case, I turned around and making that turn. You don't slow down fast in a P-51 and expect to be able to maneuver properly or have any speed left. So anyway, I came down and I went right over Hiroshima, and it was, as I say, pitch black except for a purplish glow. And we just went around that channel, went once, and then I milled in the channel there, which has mounds in it there, and in itself is dangerous. So we only made one turn around, and the next time I was further from Hiroshima, and then climbing out, taking the eastern channel, and we ditched the tanks and climbed up at an airspeed of about 240 miles an hour for at least 20 minutes before I began to see any sign of sunlight. And then the sun came out, and it was a beautiful day. Then we turned south and headed down the east coast of Kyushu, and we were looking for targets of opportunity, and I saw one airfield, and there was a couple of battered planes on there, but I didn't see anything else. But there could have been something in the hangars, I thought, so I sprayed them, and no explosions or anything like that. And then returned back home to Okinawa, and I remember out there we didn't have any navigation equipment. There was no way for them to locate us except they have that one you call in and say if you're heading this way and that way and so forth. But so you didn't have anything like you have today with a position locator or anything like that. And when I landed at Okinawa, it was before noon time, and so I wanted to get a bite to eat. See, we'd been gone quite a little while.
How long did it take to make a round trip to Japan from Okinawa?
Well, let's see. That would be. Normally it took 10 hours. No, wasn't 9 hours. Yeah. But in this case, what was I going to say?
When you landed?
When we landed, the operations officer said, how did the contact with the cat go on? Waniger got back with the other fellow, I forgot his name, and I said, well, we never made contact with the cat. Why not? I said, I don't know. He says, well, okay, you go eat, and then I'll let you know what I find out about it. So I went back, I ate and went back, and about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the operations officer, I went out in the dugout canoe we had made our tent posts and and tent cloth out of a dugout canoe, a native dugout canoe, and we had a one P-51 pontoon on one plank offset, and we had a double rudder arrangement on it because those shallow reefs there were very, very shallow, and you didn't have much leeway for a keel or anything. So we had to have that double rudder. So anyway, I was out with Cosman and the fellow from the next tent, and I got a call from the operation officer was down on the beach and called me. He says, it's Lieutenant Baker. He said, I found out what it was. It's the atomic bomb. I said, well, that's good. That didn't mean anything to me. But if that plane hadn't had its trouble with its engine, we'd have all arrived on time on there, right when the bomb actually hit, not after the cloud formed, the big heavy fallout, and all of us would have been polished off. Well, and if we'd been late getting there, I don't know what would have happened. Yeah.
Now, what happened, do you have something here that you were hung by the neck on a meat hawk?
Oh, yes.
What happened there?
That was flying out of Najab. Well, the food was terrible at Najab. I mean, they gave you stuff they called spam, which wasn't spam. It was greasy stuff. You act like as if you know about that sort of thing. Yeah. And they gave you powdered milk, and they gave you this, that, and the other thing that wasn't very tasty. So, but the Navy lived high on the hog. On the ships they had very good food. So we managed to bargain with the Navy. We paid something like eight pounds British for a hunk of steak, which we were going to eat from, and it was hung on the side of the tent. Now the tent, we had a wooden 2x6s for the planks, and we had 2x4s for railings around to support it, and of course a regular tent pole. Excuse me, my back's hurting a bit. Anyway, hanging from the upper 2x4 was one of these. You're familiar with the kit you get when you go out for fishing kit you go on a mission with? It's a pronged hook.
Oh yes, with the
three things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, somebody took off the meat off the hook, and the hook swung over just as I was jumping down from the tent to the ground. And when that happened, why, that hook got me right here, and it went right up along here and came out here. I have a little scar there, and I have scars along here. and the hook was bent when it came out, so it was really hanging. I had to pull myself up with my hand and pull it out. And Nick Giordano, who was in our tent, he went with me into down to the flight surgeon's office, and he climbed up actually they didn't have doors, they had a place a tent like this, and you come in and there's a table out here where they take information if somebody's there. Since nobody was stopping him, he got up on the table and he looked over the top and he saw the doctor pulling this thing out of, taking this thing in my neck and stitching it. And Nicky passed out.
How many missions did you fly?
I'm not sure, because they didn't put in all our missions. We could tell because if you were at a base and you go to another base, you don't get in all. But I only flew maybe 14 missions or so.
Did you ever encounter any Zeros at all, or
No,
any other Japanese aircraft?
No, well, we saw Japanese aircraft, yes, but we saw the Navy taking credit for downing a couple of Japanese aircraft. We heard them on the VHF radio. He says, I got one. Did you see that, George? And the other says, yeah, and you remember I got one too, Fred. And they're over there, and there's nothing within miles of them.
Now, you mentioned on your form that you had a mission to Shanghai. What was that?
Yes, a mission to Shanghai. That was one of the early missions. On that, we had our squadron. It was a squadron mission, which probably we had 4 flights of 4 aircraft each, 16 planes. And the nose of our planes were yellow. The nose of the P-40, the 40th Fighter Squadron were blue, and of the 39th they were red. So that was the identification for it. And in the briefing before the flight, which wasn't as early morning flight like the other, it was a morning flight, we'd been told that there would be a rendezvous point where we'd meet and we'd go back together as a group, and to if the strays were around, you go back with one of the other groups. Well, what happened is we got over to Shanghai, and I think I was probably the second or third one, I don't know which, but anyway, there was a ship in the harbor there that I aimed at and going down, and as I aimed at it, why, I got into the prop watch of one of the other aircraft. It threw me way off. So I couldn't bomb that time. I pulled up tight and I pulled around and I went down again. And this time I let it go. There was a lot of no, this time no, that's the first one only I got, and I got up very low like this, just about skimming along, and I climbed up. And when I climbed up, why, the other planes had vanished. I didn't realize that that's just how little time it takes for some planes to get away, you can see. I climbed up, and finally I saw another stray aircraft, and I thought, well, I want to go back with him. And so I kept on going up, and I thought, well, where's he going? I got behind him, and I chased him for a long distance, and I chased him until I saw that it wasn't the P-47 that I thought it was a George II, which had a Japanese one. So I gave him a parting shot, but I disappeared. And I left him, and I went back to the rendezvous point. And at the rendezvous point, what I thought was probably the 40th Fighter Squadron, I went up to the leader, and I went right up through him to let him know that I'm going back as a trailer. So he let me fly right in his wing as a third man. And we kept on going and going, and I had an awful lot of training in navigation, direct DR navigation, dead reckoning. And I thought, well, gee whiz, that can't be the 40th Fighter Squadron, unless it must be a squadron from Wake Island. And he kept on flying, and finally I said, well, I know doggone well that with this way the wind sweeps on the water, we're way north of course. So I just thought I'd say goodbye to him, and I'd go into land, or I'd be out of gasoline. So I did, and I went by, and I got back to where I was going to go in and land, and by gosh, here comes the whole squadron in behind me. So I let them land first, and I landed after, and found out that he was lost.
You were involved in the occupation of Japan. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, you mean just flying, or?
Well, you mentioned that you were in the Army of Occupation, correct? Was your squadron based in Japan for a while?
Yes, yeah. Well, what, flying experiences, or?
Well, any of your experiences there as part of the Army of Occupation. I know you mentioned here about being able to ride one of the Emperor's horses
Oh,
and
yes.
so on while you were in Japan.
Yeah. Now the Emperor's, there's a place, let's see, it's called Nikko, Japan. There's a place at Mount Sommers. Yeah, Nikko. Nikko, that's where they put the upside down pillar in because they didn't want the gods to be angry with them for making something as good as they could make, as the gods could make. Well, yeah, there's a Mount Osama up there, and we went up there. This was with my wife and child. I had a Jeep by that time, and our baby daughter, who was 1.5 years old, she probably can't remember it. It's
The Jeeps were bumpy, I remember that.
Oh, it was.
The roads were.
But anyway, we went there, and the doggone Mount Osama blew its top. The day after we were up there, so we've missed that. But
Now, how long were you there in the Army of Occupation?
well, from September 1945 to February 30th, 1948.
Now, what were some of your duties while you were there?
Oh, when I first got there, why, they were very short of help. They couldn't get help anywhere from everybody going home. They accumulated a lot of time, a lot more than I had. See, I didn't have very much combat time compared to the rest. But, so I was made cryptographic security officer. I was made adjutant of this squadron. I was made engineering officer of the squadron, and I had some other duties to assign me. But anyway, that wasn't because of my abilities. It's purely that I got there at the wrong time. So one of the things that I did, being the operations officer of the squadron, the other squadrons didn't have as many planes in good shape as the P-40, the 41st Fighter Squadron had. The 41st Fighter Squadron had the most planes in use, so that put me in charge of all the flying. And I was his second lieutenant at that time. Well, we had a mission where we were to fly in and take and try and make a pass at the heavy cruiser USS Chicago that was in Yokohama Harbor, Yokosuka really, and we were to try and see if they could, by using their radar and so forth, determine if they could shoot us down, or whether we would get away when we came in. So I sort of cheated. Instead of coming in from outside on the water side and coming in, I came in over the mountains and right down over this ship at a very low altitude. I won't mention quite so low, but anyway, when I pulled up, I and went back to my base. Why, we were asked if we could come back and attend a meeting on the success of the venture. And so Captain Weiniger and I went down to Yokosuka we were talking to them, and this USS Chicago was out there, and I was a Commander Deering, who was very knowledgeable and very nice gentleman. He was talking to me, and I said, "Gee, is there any possibility of ever getting to going to out with you on on a cruise, or is there any, or visiting the ship?" He says, "Well, we're going to make a cruise for tomorrow morning." He says, "If you, what would I need to go with you?" He says, "You just have to have orders from your commanding officer that you were a liaison officer aboard the USS Chicago." Well, I didn't drink too much, but my commanding officer, Waniger, at that time, he had become commanding officer of the 41st Fighter Squadron. He drank an awful lot. And so when I took him back home, back to the base, well, he went to bed, and I went in and I typed up orders making myself liaison officer aboard the USS Chicago. Well, that was a very interesting situation. I get to I take his Jeep, and I got a hold of the MPs there and said, "Look, Captain Waniger will want somebody to pick up his Jeep down here. Can I trust you fellows to keep it for him?" "Yes, well, we can do that." So, all right. And so I reported to the USS Chicago. I didn't know which was fore and which was aft on the ship, and of course I saluted the wrong end. But he was very nice, Commander Deering. And so at the first breakfast, why, I go in with the officers, in an officers' mess, and I go in and I sit next to Commander Deering and talk to him, and he tells me this, that, and that I was invited up the flag plot so I could see all the radar work and everything else. Very beautiful thing. It's very nice. I'm very interested. The only trouble is I had come without packing a bag. I didn't have anything but the clothes I was wearing, and I guess I had I don't think I had a darn thing else beside, and I didn't even have a tie. So I was bunked with the flight crew. They had a seaplane that would fly would be catapulted off, but it could be picked up by this net that was behind the ship and be pulled up into the ship. Well, I slept with those officers. They were good. Well, they loaned me a tie, so I would have a tie there. And so the first meal, I was talking to him. Then I was talking to another fellow began talking to me at the next meal, I thought it was funny. He didn't know me, but we talked to me, and I talked to him. And finally, after we got down to one of the junior officers there, he says, "What's your date of rank, Lieutenant?" "Oh, I guess you sit here." Well, we got down to Hiroshima, which I mentioned I had visited before. It was to be an inland cruise of the Hiroshima area, and we went in through the North North Gate there. And we visited the place where at Hiroshima they had these Japanese midget submarines, and we visited where they had the big midget destroyers, small destroyers. They aren't small. Destroyers big, but the between each what do you call it? The cabin space. Anyway, between each one of those, you have to duck down deep, practically crawl through, because the Japanese were so much shorter than the Americans, and you could bump your head very easily in there. And after we on Hiroshima and Korea, or as I said before, practically the same thing. Korea's at the mouth of the harbor, and so anyway, they were going to be there for a week, see. They had planned on it being a regular cruise. And so when we got into town, we found it very hard to find a place to get anything to drink. So we looked here, there, and everything, and I think we found we could get a little bit of beer, but we weren't too sure. I don't know, we didn't do very well on that. But anyway, what happened is I said, well, how long are we going to be here? Well, we'll be here, as I said, a week. I said, well, why? I said, can't we take any liquor ashore? There's nothing else to drink, see. And they said, no, the fellows that I was bunked with, there's two pilots, said, no, you can't do that here. So I went down to ship's steward and I said, is there any way that an officer can take anything to drink ashore? Well, I don't know, sir, but I'll look it up. And he looks it up. Oh, yes, sir. You're entitled to take one case of beer ashore. An officer is allowed to take one case of beer ashore. So naturally the next day, I'm with the same pilots again. So I said, okay. So we took the case of beer ashore and had a good time, real good time. The next day, why, there were 10 people probably took cases of beer ashore. The next day, there were a whole bunch of people lined up to take a case of beer ashore. And then when we got back, they held a meeting, which I wasn't invited to, and was told that was not the way it was in this Navy. So they not only got up, but they took me back to get rid of me back there, and went back early, back to Japan.
When did you get back to the United States?
Let's see, I think it was May. Let's see, I came back on February 29th, yes. Yeah, I came back to the United States for,
By ship.
by ship, yeah.
1946?
Yeah, 48, yeah, February 48.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were you discharged around that time too then?
No, I stayed in. But anyway, Martha, that ship back, when we hit typhoons,
Oh,
and it was so bad that was ship that would normally take about 5 days took 10 days to go back. And I had come back by ship. My son came back. My son was born in Japan, and says on the base of his feet, made in Japan. But anyway,
Made in Canada.
but he had a cataract in his eye which required immediate attention. So he was shipped back with his mother in February. No, wait a minute. It was December.
Of 47.
Yeah. She went back there. Then I stayed in the military service during Korea and during and flying. I was flying duty, and during part of Vietnam I was still on flying status, but I didn't see any action.
Did you see any action in Korea?
No. I was on flying status, but I was in Washington working on the for the Office of Aerospace Research, and doing work for them on writing books and on all sorts of scientific and so forth things.
So when did you finally leave the service?
And middle of Korea, about then was the final discharge. I had about 26 years of service.
Okay.
I'm sorry. When did you get out of the reserves?
During
I thought it was after Vietnam.
No, it was during Vietnam, and let's see. Oh, an interesting point of that, I was when I was writing this book about the Office of Aerospace Research, that I was telling you about. It required me to work with the Navy Department, and so I went into this place one day, and this fellow says to me, "I know you." I was with the Navy Department down in Washington. I says, "Well, I don't know. He says, "Will you?" Did he name different naval stations and so forth? I said, "No, I've never been based on a naval station." He says, "Well, gee, I know you." And I said, "Well, I don't know." I said, "The only time I was ever on the Navy in a way, I wasn't. I was just attached." And he says, "That's right." He says, "You're the guy who had the beer." So he got a hold of an SNJ, which was a Navy plane, and he and I went flying.
Yeah. You didn't finish the story about how you did have an opportunity to see those horses of the Emperor.
Oh, that's right.
And also,
The what?
the Emperor's
The Emperor's
horse.
horses,
Oh,
white
yes.
horses. That would
Well,
be
yes, about out up there. Well, at Nico. Well, it's true that but the Emperor had a white horse, but he had a lot of white horses, so it wasn't, it's just that I had a picture of myself on it,
How did you get a chance to ride that?
well, I asked to. We were early in the occupation. The Japanese were very good, still very, very polite to us and tried to accommodate us.
You also knew some generals that were important, didn't you?
Well, yes, well, David, I told him David is...
No, in the Japanese.
Oh, yes, I knew the man who was the chief instructor of, what's the thing they break wood in? Karate, and also these swords.
Oh, the samurai swords?
Yeah, and so that was very early in the occupation. I went up, and what had happened was there had been an accident where we had dropped makeshift bombs on targets at a place near Karuizawa. Anyway, I'll use Karuizawa for the moment as the place. And a lady had been injured, and we were trying to make some, give her something to help her out. And I met this fellow who was the chief of teaching both the use of the samurai sword and the karate. And he took a pipe, ordinary, I've called black iron pipe, you know. And he took it and he cut it right, hit it, and it didn't hurt the sword at all. Well, he gave me this samurai sword to try it, and I took it, and I took a piece out of that sword, samurai sword that went half through the blade, and that was the end of that one. Now that wasn't one of the best ones, I'm sure, but anyway, it's how you hit it. It does it. And he chopped with his hands. And I've acquainted, by the way, when I was in Japan, why there was a fellow who had been working around the camp up there before we got our permanent quarters, and our quarters were made of little rooms. Am I holding you up on something?
No.
The quarters were made of little rooms that we constructed ourselves, and the Tommy mats had been pulled out because they were full of fleas. So he helped to do some of this constructing, and he asked me, as I saw him looking at my flight gear, and I said, "Oh, do you know airplanes?" And he said, "Oh, yes, I know. You know, we had a pointy talkie," and he did have a few words of English. I didn't have much in Japanese at that time. And he says, "Do you mind if I give you a gift?" I said, "Well, I don't want a gift." He says, "Well, I brought in a gift for you. I think you might like this one." And he'd already brought it in. He had this big brown bag with bottles in them. And he says, "Do you like sake?" And I said, "Oh, I think sake has to be hot." He says, "No, this is drunk cold. He says, I think you would be interested in this. So I said, okay, what do you have? Well, here's a sake. And I said, well, sake's to drink, isn't it? He says, yes, it is. And I said, well, how did you come to get this? Well, it turned out he was the chief pilot on one of these great big Japanese Nakashima flying boats that were faster than the U.S. ones and cruised longer and everything else. And he was picked to be a kamikaze pilot. But on the day the war ended, he went in and he swiped a couple of bottles of the sake. So then we opened it up, and after I said, well, we'll drink it. Boy, it was awful. it was like full gin, only it had this distinct taste of vodka, but you could drink it. It could be done if you wanted to. And after we drunk so much of it, I says, I began to pass out. We drank the doggone things, and I says, now, doggone, show me where take me out with the American ship. I'll sink the GD thing. And by the way, I got a Japanese sword over there. It was given to me by a fellow who had been working in Manchuria at the end of the war, and he had come back and he was working out at the base there, and he saw my Japanese flying suits, which I had collected as a souvenir, and he thought he would like to have one of those so his wife could have something warm. See, the Japanese had these fur-lined flying suits with heaters in them, and so I had them. They didn't mean much to me. They wouldn't fit me. They were too small for me. And he said, well, he would like one very much if I could let him have it. And I said, sure. And he gave me his sword, which was his family sword, which was the year 1735, I think it was. Oh, wait a minute, it's got to be older than that. Older than that. Was Japanese. Yeah, I've lost it. What's the name of the Japanese sword that I have, Micah?
I always call it a samurai sword, so I don't know.
No. Well, anyway, it was made way back in 1500s or something, and it is in beautiful shape, but it wasn't worth quite as much as the full sword because it had been cut down. His father had been a member of the Imperial Guards, and in the First World War, he'd carried the family sword, and he'd had it cut down to saber length, which is shorter than a sword, and that knocked about 40% off off the value of it. But it still is it's an Japanese treasure, and if I took it back there again, I would get paid. I would have to leave it there. But later, when I found out how much it was worth, I tried to contact and find out if I could find the owner, but the owner had passed away.
Okay, do you have any questions? Okay, well, we'd like to thank you very much for your interview.
Well,
It was excellent. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We just